we're going to transform this little thumbnail into a finished drawing today. And, well, this is going to be an experiment. I've never done this before, so here we go. So I'm turning down the opacity on this thumbnail, making a new layer first of all, titling it Sketch, obviously, because we're sketching. And so now we're just drawing over top of the thumbnail, but we're not screwing up the thumbnail. And this is all going to be done in Clip Studio. If you haven't heard of it, it's really similar to Photoshop. I like it a lot better for drawing than I do Photoshop now, and it's cheap too. So you can get it for $50, and a lot of times on sale for $25, and it's amazing. So anyway, so I'm just gonna start drawing hair because I don't really know what this character is supposed to look like. So a good thing to do when you're not really sure where to start is just find an area that is, you know, obscure enough and vague enough, like hair, or, you know, random weird little details that don't really matter. So you can just start pushing details into those areas, and as you start adding detail, you start, you know, your brain starts connecting dots. And so that's a good way to start when you're not really sure what your goal is with it all. You know, what, I don't have the concept design for this character, so I'm making it up as I go. And, you know, all I had was some thumbnails, some late night thumbnails to work with. So is this hair? Is this horns? I don't know. I'm kind of figuring it out as I go. I'm thinking there are some kind of thick horns here. But it could all change as I draw these hairs. So that's a good way to start out drawings. If you're lost at where to start, you know, don't start with the confusing things that you have no idea what it's going to be like. How are these legs going to attach to the body? I don't know. You know, how does the hair connect to the face? I don't know. You know, so we're just kind of throwing in detail. It's kind of like taking a big fat paintbrush and just slapping in a big broad stroke just to kind of get something started. So that's what I'm doing right now. And just so you know, I'm using a textured pen tool. It's in the inking in Clip Studio. It's one of the inking tools. But I've found that it's so nice and crisp that I like sketching with it better than anything. So it's just the standard textured pen that's in the inking pen tools. And now I know this background is going to be black, so I'm kind of just starting to think that I need to fill in some big black spaces just to kind of get a sense of how that's going to look. So again, I'm not really sure what this is going to, you know, end up looking like. And so I'm using the lasso tool right now to select a big black area so I can fill it in really quickly. And it's just, again, so I can figure out if I like the direction that I'm going. This could change, you know, take off the sketch just to get a quick read on what this hair is feeling like, you know. A lot of times art is a feeling, like what does it feel like? And so now I'm just going to go to the eyes because, you know, I feel like, okay, the hair's cool, the horns are cool, it's working with the black. Let me just throw in some eye shapes because I don't know how these eyes are going to look. They're going to be really simple and generic right now. I'm thinking kind of beady eyes, you know, not necessarily the typical spider eyes. This is kind of a spider monster, but I don't want it to necessarily come across like it's just a spider, you know. So I've purposely randomized these eyeballs as far as their positioning goes to kind of get a little bit more of a strange creature feel to this. So now that we got some eyes and some hair in there, we're starting to see, okay, yeah, I'm feeling this hair. I think it's working. So we'll just keep working on it now. So we're coming into some other question marks now. Where does this hair stop? Does it go right into the gums? Does it thin out? And these are all questions we'll have to answer. So let's move on to the leg. So, these legs, they're kind of basic, but, again, I don't know if I want to keep it this way or not, so I'm going to just follow the sketch and just quickly throw in something and see how it feels. Let's get some little cross-hatching type detail in there, and I always think of it as like Todd McFarlane detail because I grew up obsessing over Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man and all the little nuanced details that he would put in. So this leg is all right. It feels like I don't know. There's not really. There's one joint. There's only like one joint in it. So I don't know if that's gonna work, but we'll just keep running with it. See what happens. So I like the idea of some hairs sticking off the back of the leg, so we'll throw those in. This kind of feels like a joint here, so we will, you know what, let's change this one so that it has that same joint too. I think that alone makes it more satisfying of a read. It feels like it could be an actual creature leg that, maybe there's two joints there, 2 or 3 joints in there, I don't know. But it feels like it could actually move around and bend around now. So I'm just gonna, based on the really sloppy thumbnail, just kind of throw in some detail. I'm actually following it really closely. Sometimes it's surprising how your thumbnails, even though they are just really simple, how just following your thumbnails really closely can be the right way to go. Usually I don't like signing off on my thumbnails until there's something really special that I like about it. I mean, what is that special thing? I don't know. I don't know how to explain that. I especially don't know how to explain that when you're looking at like a 3D model, trying to find an angle based on a 3D model location. It's just a big mystery to me what makes it work and what doesn't. It's usually more in the detail that you add to it as you're drawing it and cleaning it up that makes it interesting. So I don't know that as far as 3D goes, but this isn't 3D. So I'll just fill in some more blacks here. Excuse me. I'm probably not going to edit out any of my grunting and stuff, so I apologize in advance. I mean, come on, this is 3 hours long. So just throwing in some more blacks here because I know that this is all going to be black. And so, once you kind of get an idea of what you like, and if you know there's going to be black in the background, you might as well start throwing it in early just to kind of see if there's something missing or to see if there's problems with that black. Like, for instance, if you're really satisfied with your line weights, then throwing in these blacks they're just going to destroy your line weights, so you won't have a read on those line weights anymore. That's part of the reason why I'm doing it, because there's hair, there's all this hair. I actually switched my brush to white now, and so I could just paint in some hairs really quick over top of that black. And actually that's working pretty good. Get some little muscles and tendons in there on that leg joint. Yeah, turn off the sketch underneath and it's starting to work. All right, fast forward just a little bit. I forgot to record. I was blocking in more blacks around the legs, and just to kind of get a sense of what it's looking like. And I like it. Now I'm having a little bit of a problem up here at the top because the sketch, it doesn't show it the creature being in the frame. It shows it going off the top of the frame, which I really liked that about the sketch. But that means I'd have to extend him a little bit, which isn't a problem, but it does slightly change the feel of the composition. And so I'm trying to figure out, do I want to extend those hairs up off the screen? Or do I want it to just, am I content with it going to black at the top of the screen? Because all those subtle things really do feed into the end feeling and the end result. So if you have too much hair going off and stopping right at the edge of the border, then that kind of starts becoming a problem, because it's what they call, man, I haven't even thought about this word in a while, because I haven't been working in a studio where we actually use this lingo, but it's called a tangent, where your eyeball, your eyes are being led off screen right to the edge because the hairs are, in this case, the hairs are stopping right at the edge of the border of the panel of the frame, and so it can potentially be a tangent. And so I want to make sure that either the hairs go all the way across that border and go off the edge clearly, or they stop before it. So other little problems, that I'm trying to work out as I'm doing this. And you'll see that art is kind of like problem solving. A friend of mine would always talk about it that way. This guy named John Clausen, who's amazing. I have a podcast with him if you guys want to hear a little bit about him. Children's book story author and artist, and just, he was a friend of mine I had at DreamWorks. Amazing artist. So anyway, he would always say, like, drawing this stuff is problem solving. And, now I'm not, this isn't his words anymore, but basically as soon as you start drawing something, you're trying to solve problems, whether it's how all these shapes fit together. It's possibly the contrasts of all this stuff, how the motion's going to feel, how, does the end result make you feel a certain way? All these are things that you're trying to solve, and every little stroke adds or takes away from that. So again, I'm switching back and forth between white and black as I am starting to get an idea of what this hair is going to look like. It's kind of getting the where the wild things are, right? Is that the name of it? Where the wild things are type feel to it, with these big kind of thick haired horn type things. And I really want to give it a sense of randomness to the horns. So it's looking all right. I'm not 100% convinced yet. I think there's going to have to be some noodling around with this. And of course, let's put in a little twisty horn here just to break up the monotony, and show that these horns can grow really strangely if they want to. And you have one kind of sticking out the side, or not going quite with the grain of the hair, the direction of the hair. Let's put another one over here too. So it's really easy to switch back and forth between black and white. If you have your black color be your foreground color and your white be the background color, you can hit X. And you can do this with Photoshop too. Hit X and it flops that. It flops your brush between those two colors. So that's all I'm doing. I'm hitting X as I'm sketching, as I want to switch back and forth between white and black. Hit X. Then I'm not using an eraser at all. It's all ink, just black or white ink. Putting in another little horn, like kind of nestled into the other one. I don't know. There's this, it's stuff like that that makes something feel more realistic, even though it's a drawing, and I'm not going for photorealism. It's like these weird little, almost random things that make something kind of have a life of their own. And so I always try to find something like that I can throw into my art, into stories, to help sell the idea that, if this was a real thing, this gnarly spider monster with horns that are half hair, half horns, they're gonna grow kind of weird, like, I don't know if that makes sense. I might just need to shut up a little bit. This is kind of fun to watch myself draw, even though I'm not drawing. It's kind of a relief, because in the moment, you're kind of stressing out about these lines, trying to make them work, trying to solve the problems, And believe it or not, this is real time, so it looks like I'm going really fast, and when I look at my videos after the fact, I do admit they do look like I'm moving fast. But if you have a pencil and you're scribbling and you're sketching, you're doing little sketches, it's surprising how fast you're actually drawing. You get faster the more you do it, so you get comfortable with things, and then you start just going a lot faster. Like when you first start drawing, it's about learning line weights, and every little thing is a question mark. But eventually, you stop thinking about the basics, and your thoughts are more directed towards composition and storytelling and trying to express a mood and a feeling, So let's put that same joint in this leg. Just throwing a little bit of detail. Yeah, it's starting to take some shape. Okay, so I just hit the this little button over here that kind of rotates it flops the canvas. And in Photoshop, you actually have to flip the canvas, and so it has to restructure all those pixels. It actually takes the canvas and flops it. But in Clip Studio, there's this nice little button that your file doesn't actually get flopped. It just changes the view of it. So that is a great way to see things from a new perspective quickly, especially when you're sketching and drawing and trying to figure out proportions, anatomy. It's a great idea to flop your canvas horizontally, or even upside down sometimes, or rotate it sideways or something. Just look at it quickly from a different angle, and your mind will immediately see the problem areas. And so you'll notice that I do flop the canvas from time to time, just to see if I can find any areas that are ugly or not working. So when I started drawing this background leg, now that I'm realizing it's going to go in the background, I just wanted to put some black around it because, again, I'm not sure how this is going to work, and all my detail and line weight and all that stuff is going to get lost. So I might as well block in these blacks now. You know, just like big heavy strokes just to get the shapes in there. And then I'm also able to see if the whole composition is working together now. And for the most part, it is. It's looking pretty good. But I do need to work on that hair. But let's just get these eyes done. Again, you know, you're not sure what to do with one section, so move on to another section that you can experiment with. You know, in this case, I just kind of want to finish the eyes off because it helps me make decisions about other parts of the body once the eyes are in there. And these eyes might change, you know, maybe this will not be the position of these eyes. Maybe the hair will move around, maybe the legs will move around. I just, you know, in the moment you don't know. But getting them in there at least allows you to see what you like and don't like. And you can zoom way out too. This is a trick that one of my friends would do at a motion design studio. It was kind of funny though. He would actually he would zoom way out so it's like an inch big on his screen, and then he would like look real he would forget he zoomed out, and so then he's like looking like an inch away from the monitor at this little tiny picture, and oh my goodness, it would just make my eyes hurt just thinking about him doing that. But yeah. So anyway, zooming out is a great way to just really quickly get a read on how the whole picture is, you know? Especially if you're zooming in to get details, it's great to zoom out every now and then. It's more about the structure, you know? You're zooming out to see that structure. You zoom in, you're dealing with the details, but you got to zoom out to see if those details are fitting together. Get some little details in there. Yeah, it's so cute. All right. All right, let's keep painting these horns and changing the shapes of some of this stuff. It's kind of getting a little top heavy on this one side. Maybe that's good though. So I don't like how kind of basic the hair is looking, and I'm hoping to kind of break it up a little bit more. It's looking a little bit too groomed almost. You know, and I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of experimenting here. I mean, should the horns be really out there and abnormal and lopsided? And I don't think so. Something's got to change on some of this hair, though. It's not quite feeling right. It's like Garfield stripes right here. The nice thing about the horns is they really do break it up. So almost feels Kind of like a porcupine now. Well, maybe I'll come back to it. Do some more flipping out, flipping the page to see what's standing out. And yeah, turn off the thumbnail underneath just to kind of get a good idea of what the finished product's going to look like. Is it holding up, you know, without the sketch? This dude needs a serious comb. Yeah, it's just, there's just something weird about it. I don't know what the answer is yet. But I'll just keep chiseling away at this thing, adding detail to these little horns. You know, like when you're stuck, all you can do is just keep going in a direction, really, you know, and enough massaging and you kind of it falls into place. Excuse me. Usually. Sorry, guys. I shouldn't be drinking while I'm streaming, right? Oh boy. Okay, it's late. It's 10 o'clock here. That's late for me. So yeah, I'm gonna just keep pushing and pulling this hair because it just feels, it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel groomed necessarily, like I was saying before, but it doesn't feel natural either. You know, have you guys seen, like, I think it's sheep, where it's either goats or sheep, where they have like another, like, they have multiple horns that grow out of their head. So it's not just the two nice uniform horns. Maybe it's a certain breed, I don't know, but there's a certain breed maybe that it just keeps growing another horn, and so some of them have like 3 horns or 4 horns. I don't know how many they get, but they're always weird and just gnarly, and they look like they're out of place, but it still feels like it's kind of naturally how it, you know, grew. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this. Just create that feeling of kind of creepy natural. If that's a thing. There's definitely a creepy natural. And it's definitely lopsided, so this is looking kind of interesting, but over here it's kind of a little boring. I want to get some excitement into this area. Kind of started making these look like they're a bunch of hairs, but I don't think I'll do that. I'm thinking it's more like porcupine quills almost. The more I work at it, it seems to be a more interesting combination. Spider with porcupine-like quills. I was always hesitating to live stream for a while because I spend so much time kind of pausing and just looking at my drawings just to kind of see what it feels like, you know, and just to kind of step back and look at it. And so I was always concerned before I started live streaming that it would just be so boring because I'd be pausing so much. But when I look back on my live streams now, I'm like, you know, it's not that bad. It actually moves pretty quick. So maybe some of these hairs can just kind of be lost in the darkness. So it's almost like this character is going off the screen, but you just don't see those hairs because they're not illuminated. You know? Again, just back and forth with the white and black brush, pushing and pulling, just experimenting with the shapes of these things, trying to make it feel like it belongs. It's feeling better. Yeah. Okay. Let's just keep throwing in some horns and hairs and move these things around a little bit. See, there's a nice tangent. It goes right up to the edge. So let's just, push it so it goes all the way off the edge. Or cut it down. There we go. Yeah. See, that's the example of dealing with a tangent. You can either go all the way through or not far enough. But what you don't want is that tip to land right on the edge. I mean, that's a rule that can be broken too. You can have that tip land on the edge if you want to get your audience to kind of have that uncomfortable stop and be drawn off the page. There's brilliant painters and artists that have used tangents in their favor. So my sketches always seem to have the most energy, and so I always reference them. Well, I like to reference them, go back to them again and again, just to make sure I'm not missing something or it's not getting pushed into a different shape or something. Like I'm thinking I need to get this a little bit wider now. What feels good about the thumbnail versus what feels good or bad about the drawing, and how can I recreate that same feeling? Because the thumbnail is so loose and simple that your mind fills in so many gaps, and so you can kind of get a certain feeling from a thumbnail, and then sometimes when you're cleaning it up, that feeling is completely lost because you're not allowing your brain to fill in those gaps for you anymore. And that's why cartoons work so well. Like really simply drawn cartoons is like it allows people to fill in those gaps themselves. And so how do you allow someone's imagination to still fill in gaps, but at the same time clean it up? It's a trick. It's tricky. And I'm more or less thinking about the shape. How does the shape work at the top? How's the overall shape of this hair ball read and look? And I'm starting to deal now with the tangents at the top, with all the hair that's tangenting up there, and just kind of knocking it down. Again, the body could be going up off the frame, but we don't need to know that. What we need to deal with is what's illuminated. So I apologize in advance for taking so much time to continue massaging this hair, but it's kind of the main, it's kind of a big part of the picture, so. Let's compare it again to the sketch. There's like a wideness to the sketch that's nice. It feels a little wider than the drawing feels. Maybe this will solve that. Let's kind of find a new home for this where it can feel a little bit more naturally positioned. And it doesn't crowd into the eyes either. You know, and this little detail stuff, you know, you add that takes 2 seconds. Sometimes it's, you know, that's sometimes the missing link that allows your brain to fill in the gaps. Like, what are those details? Is that dirt clumps? Are those little eyes like hiding behind the hair? You know. So I do like throwing in a lot of like little. That's definitely an eye hiding behind the hair there. I do like throwing in a lot of like little kind of that Todd McFarlane detail in places because, you know, for whatever reason it just works. I mean, you know, there's certain art that it doesn't work with, but comics obviously work really well with that kind of detail, and that's what we're working on is a comic. So. So what is that detail? I don't know. It's not my job to decide what it is, though. And you can, like, you know, really make it difficult on you to draw this stuff if you have to tell people exactly what these details are. You know, you could take 20 hours on this piece, making sure that everyone knows what those details are. But to my experience, it's never helped my pictures feel more alive. In fact, it's kind of sucked a lot of the energy out of them. The more I refine and explain what all the details are. This guy is kind of off in the distance. I'll probably do a lot of that with the coloring, though. So I don't need to get too crazy with the drawing. It's nice when you're coloring it. When you know you're going to color it, and you know how you're going to color it, it's nice because you just kind of have freedom to not do as much as you need, as you might have to if you're just inking it or going to black and white. Or if someone else is coloring it, usually you have to indicate what you're looking for or just let someone else figure it out and trust their instincts. Okay. Full screen. Let's do some flipping. Yeah, there's some things that I'm still not sure about, but like if I want to have them kind of come down here a little bit more. I could hint at that hair. See, this will be harder to ink because I'm actually drawing in hairs with white, and I don't have a nice white out pen that works as good as a brush does like this. So who knows what will happen when I go to ink this thing. My sketch left it very vague what's going to happen here and here, how this transition will work, and even down here. It's easy in a sketch, but now that I'm actually going to color it and ink it, I need to figure that out. I need to figure out what's going on. The light source is directly behind him, so it's shining like this from one area. And so it's illuminating this creature. It's going to illuminate them, which I'll just ink them full detailed basically and light it with the coloring. But how this transition happens is kind of a mystery to me right now. And it might be something I might do in Photoshop with textures and gradients and stuff like that. But it'd be nice to at least get the drawing. It'd be nice to get the drawing to... I need to figure this drawing out though before I can move on. So see, you know, if you were just doing this as an ink drawing, you would approach it completely different than if you knew you were coloring it. And since I know I'm going to color it, I think there's going to be workarounds I know there's going to be workarounds in the coloring phase, whether it's just glows of light over top of it. So I think the best bet is to just finish this out with this character in a black room and not ink in that lighting. So that's the direction we're going to go now. So there's not really much detail for what the bottom of this character's body looks like. So this is all just kind of, you know, let's make up some good shapes that work. And make sure it doesn't interfere with the characters. You know, you can change the shape of something so that it doesn't interfere with a foreground object, you know? So that's kind of what I'm thinking. And now, so, you know, obviously this hair is either got to come right up to the teeth or it's got to fade out. And I'm thinking I like having these gums fade slowly and from a meaty gums to little fine hair. You know, like if you look at a dog's mouth around his lips, there's no hair, and then it's real fine, and then it gets longer and longer. So same idea, you know. So let's just get this mouth drawn in, figure out these teeth, and then we can play with that hair next. So the sketch is neat because it's really raw. It's really, you know, it's actually pretty good. I want to really stick real close to that sketch. You know, these teeth are definitely not, they're definitely not straight or normal. So some are crooked and overlapping and small and stubby or sideways. You know, whatever kind of flaws I can put into it. It's going to really help sell the idea of this crusty looking character. Look at that tooth. That thing's like, what is that? That's a really awkward one. But it works. Love that Joker's smile. Yeah, I'm liking that. I use the lasso tool a lot to just kind of clean up certain things. It was a technique I learned at DreamWorks. There was a lot of Kung Fu Panda stuff that we would actually use the lasso tool to create entire pieces of artwork. And that Kung Fu Panda animation, like the hand-drawn animation style, was primarily a lasso tool style. I worked on a lot of the backgrounds and for those scenes, and it was pretty much created all with the lasso tool. And I'm sure I'll get into that these future tutorials or updates. I'll probably even show you a bunch of the Kung Fu Panda stuff that I worked on. And even show you how we did that technique. That'd be a fun one. Because that was really... There's very few jobs that I actually really enjoyed the style. And Kung Fu Panda was one of them. Man, it was just... The style was beautiful. And it wasn't even just, like the lasso technique. But just learning, like, how to draw Chinese buildings and stuff like that. And it was beautiful. It was amazing. It was fun to draw. So, I was really glad to be on that. And then the art direction and the art directors and production designers were amazing. So, and they were fun to work with. Anyway, so we are just drawing these gnarly teeth. But like anything, you do get tired of it. Though, I worked on Kung Fu Panda 1, 2, and 3, and it was amazing to learn it all. But then after, so many years, after 6 years, I was really done, I really enjoyed it, but I was ready to move on. And at that time I was, I started SITHRAH, and I was really kind of starting to get kind of in this headspace of like, I need to leave DreamWorks and leave Hollywood. So it's a long story. So it's a weird thing to talk about, but it's a perfect thing to talk about while I'm drawing these teeth. Give him a nice gap there. It's looking beautiful. He is looking beautiful. I mean, it. I don't know if it's a he or a she. Or a both. Alright, to figure these gums out, this is, I'm trying to figure out if I should have the gums kind of crusty and deformed like I do with the teeth, or give them a little bit more have them be all wrinkly and crusty, or more non-existent. This almost looks like lips now. Gums and lips. I don't really like that. So I guess it's kind of about figuring out how this transition from the hair to the gums is going to work. Man, it looks like that tooth is gonna... It would be a painful tooth because it's sticking out all crooked. Anyway, sorry, no more mumbling. Yeah, I think I'm gonna just go more towards non-gums. I mean, there'll be gums because you see the gums, but not really emphasize the gums, because then it just, I don't know. It's just not the look I'm enjoying, so. I mean, obviously, I am making gums. It's just a different kind of gums. Give every artist, give 100 artists gums to draw, and they'll all draw different gums. How's that? So, I think this is working though, where that, you know, like we were talking about before, the dog's snout, and how the gums just kind of lead into thin hairs, and then they get wider and bigger as it gets further away from the mouth. So I think that's kind of what I'll do. I mean, but you know, there are no real lips either over top of the gums, but that's fine. I think lips on top of this guy would be kind of funny looking, like Little Shop of Horrors type funny looking. It would definitely change the dynamic. There's something weird about just having teeth without lips. There's always a creepiness factor to teeth without lips. It just instantly looks creepy. To me. Maybe it doesn't look creepy to you, but definitely to me. Yeah, see, that has a nice feel to it. It's a nice transitional feel from those, you know, soft, meaty, juicy gums to the hair. So I'll just kind of recreate and continue that train of thought on the top as well now. And you know, like, what's the direction of the hair going? Like, I'm thinking it kind of comes out from the eyes, comes out from the mouth. Yeah, I'm liking this. And then there's a little snaggletooth right there. This is kind of, you know, growing in its own way. One of these teeth is doing his own thing. He doesn't play by the rules of the other teeth. And then it just takes time to like continue this pattern throughout the rest of the picture. You know, a lot of times you establish what you want it to look like, and then you're like, okay, so that just means I got to do a lot of little hairs. So give me 15 minutes to draw all these little hairs now. You know, I mean, it kind of becomes a just not brainless, because you're still thinking about the way the hairs, you know, the direction they're moving and stuff, but it's just kind of like, now you're just putting in the work, you know. At this phase, it's like I feel like I figured out how this works. Now it's just, I'm doing it. I'm just doing the, you know, putting in the time. If that makes sense. There's always kind of like there's different stages with art. There's like the mental stage where you're trying to wrestle with actually what it is you're trying to do and say, and then there's the state of just execution, just executing the idea that now you are confident in. And once I put in these teeth and kind of figured out these gums and the hair, now I'm confident in the idea, and so now let's just execute this, you know. So at this phase, I could just put on the headphones, listen to music, and just kind of zone out and do this. Spend 15 minutes or so executing. But before that, it was a lot of kind of do a line, think about it, do another line, think about it, you know. But the thinking stage is definitely not over. It's gonna have to be, you know, initiated again once we get into another section, you know, whether it's the people standing there or the, especially the coloring. The coloring is going to be another, you know, phase where we're trying to figure it out. So yeah, I just wanted to look at it without the characters to just see, does this shape look right, you know? Does it hold up on its own without the characters there? You know, a lot of times when you have something blocking something, it's like it kind of changes the composition a little bit of it, you know, so sometimes turning things off allows you to see if there's something else broken that needs to be addressed. For those of you who are watching, you probably got this from Gumroad, or you're probably looking at it from Patreon. This is most likely going to be used as an example of what my patron-only videos, patron and Gumroad-only videos will be like for my working process. I plan on doing one of these a month, and just showing a complete start to finish process video as I'm talking about it and as I'm doing it real time. And my thoughts are that I will release them on Gumroad simultaneously as on Patreon. And if you're a $5 or a $10 or up patron, you'd get access to these videos every month as I release them. But if you just want to get the one that you want, there's that possibility. There's that ability to do that through Gumroad. I'll probably offer them on Gumroad, where you will get the video and the PSD file of the image, and that way you don't have to be a patron if you don't want to, but you can experience whichever drawing you want to experience. And I don't know what the price will be. It might be $5 or $7 or $10. I don't know. I don't quite know yet. But this one I will probably most likely put up there for free as an example. Maybe not. I just don't know these things. It's always kind of a mystery. Maybe I'll have it free for a certain amount of time. So, so there you go. So anyway, if you got this from Gumroad, please check out my Patreon too. I would love. I'm trying to get 1,000 true fans on Patreon. I really believe that an artist can make a living doing what they love and doing something that is more honest and true to them with just the support of 1,000 true fans, as Kevin Kelly wrote in his book. I believe the book called The Long Tail. And so that's my goal with Patreon. And there's a lot of, I'm doing tutorials monthly, and that is stuff that will be based on what patrons suggest and vote on. So there's that. Some of those tutorials will find their way over to Gumroad as well. Maybe all of them will, but they will be price. And also, if you got this from Gumroad, know that if you pledge $20 on Patreon, you'll get a discount code for everything on Gumroad to be free. So if you have your eye on a lot of Gumroad stuff, all you gotta do is become a $20 backer, and you can have access to everything on my Gumroad for that $20 patron, $20 per month patron amount. So anyway, back to the drawing. So I just blocked in the blacks underneath him because, since we decided that in the coloring is where I will do the transition, that gradient from light to dark, I figured, okay, let's just get all the blacks in there. Let's just finish drawing this character. get them all fleshed out so that we have something to work with, you know. And as you know, or as you maybe you don't know, but it seems to me like the more I've studied other artists, you know, when you study an artist and you're like, this painting is amazing, how in the world did they do it? You're looking at all the pieces put together, and you're looking at the finished product, and it's hard to see how they did it. But once you break it down to the techniques and the different steps that they took, you realize that it's really simple. It's a lot more simple, and it's a lot less magical than it appears. And I learned that a lot by studying other artists at DreamWorks, because I could see their work, and then I would go ask them to show me how they did it, and or just digging through their files and opening up their Photoshop files. And it's amazing how it's pretty much always just a procedural thing. Like, okay, first I start with this, I block this out, and then the next step is I add this color value over top of everything. The next step is I do a lighting pass. The next step is I do this, and then I mask between these two things, you know. And it really demystifies it once you start breaking things down into steps and stages. And so that's basically what I'm doing right now. I've realized what I need to do, and so I'm just trying to get this stage done now. I'm trying to get the paint bucket tools. Pretty amazing in Clip Studio, but sometimes it needs help. Anyway, I'm trying to get all these stages done so that I can just move on to the next stage. And right now it's like, okay, let's finish out this spider monster. Stage 2 will be, let's draw these characters. And then stage 3 we'll start dealing with color and stuff, and atmosphere. But you know, I could start with the coloring right now and start putting in atmosphere, but then I'd have to go back and work again on the earlier stages, and it's a real easy way to make you demotivated, at least for myself. If I don't finish a stage that I'm working on, then I get kind of bored with it, because I feel like I already did that stage. I want to move on to the coloring stage now. But you know, just it's like, okay, I just need to finish this stage, and then I can move on to the next stage. You know, it's like laying the foundation of a house before you start building the walls. You're eager to get those walls in place so you can start putting in the electrical and the plumbing, but lay that foundation first and let it dry and let it cure, you know, and get those the foundation with all the pipes and whatever inside it solid and right. Get it right first, and then everything else will go quickly later. But if you do part of that foundation first, and then you start building the wall, and then do another part of the foundation, you just waste a lot of time. So it may be fun in the moment to jump ahead, but you do waste a lot of time jumping ahead, because you have to jump back then. So, and in the same way, it's kind of like how I said before, that making the thumbnail, making sure there's something about the thumbnail that really sings to me and really stands out and really looks interesting. That's another stage of that foundation. I mean, that really is the foundation right there. But you know, now that we're in the drawing phase, like obviously this is foundational prior to coloring it, you know. a lot of back and forth on those legs on the right hand side. There's just they just don't feel like functional legs yet. So kind of just massaging them and reworking them and just seeing if I can get them to look a little bit closer to something that would work for this creature. I think he's having the shape that I kind of intended in the sketch, and I'll keep the legs kind of hidden in the darkness. And let's see, we'll just move on to the characters now. I think for the most part, the guy's mostly there, other than the section of the mouth that the characters are covering up. And so maybe if I draw these characters first, then I will know specifically the areas that I don't have to worry about drawing with the teeth. Even though I might finish out the teeth behind him, but it's okay. It's not really that much. And I really like this sketch, so I think I'm going to kind of stick pretty close to it, actually, because the body language feels good, and I'm more about conveying like the body language and the emotion and the feeling and the mood and the tone than I am about sticking perfectly to a model sheet on characters. And I mean, if you've seen my art, you probably have picked that up by now. And actually, I think I don't think I started out that way. Well, let me think. When I was in high school, I did this comic called Phobos, and for the most part, I tried to stick pretty close to what the characters should look like. But yeah, there was a lot more expressiveness, I think, even naturally in that. So, okay. So maybe it's always kind of been a part of my, approach to art, is to kind of make the characters be more expressive and change, if they needed to. But when I became a professional artist, I wrestled with that because I don't think I understood that that's what I was doing in my art. And you get on these jobs, especially with companies like Mattel. Mattel was the worst example of this. You would practically have to trace their model sheet, even though a character, like I did these Barbie commercials, and we'd have to trace this model sheet that was approved. Even though the characters were expressing emotions and whatever, we would still have to. They would compare like a shot of her going, "Hey guys," and yelling, to a model sheet where she's just sitting there front on smiling, and it just ended up. We had to reanimate these things because it wasn't on model, so to speak, and then the animation just looked stiff and horrible. And now I know there's some productions where it's not like that with Mattel, but this production was very much so like that, and it kind of just made me hate model sheets, even though I realized why they are important. But then I got onto Kung Fu Panda and was at DreamWorks after that, and it was really surprising to see how they would, like the art director, this guy named Ramon Zebach, he was like, I remember him saying like, the shots need to be awesome, and that's more important than having it be on model. And when I heard them say that, these amazingly, wonderfully talented people, it kind of gave me this new burst of energy with my own stuff. Like when people on Kung Fu Panda were saying characters can change from the model sheet, it was just like freeing. And then also, um, earlier there was this animation called, obviously you guys probably have heard of it, Fooly Cooly, or FLCL, and very strange animation. But the thing about it was the characters would change style depending on the mood of things, and I thought that was so neat. And then there's also like Trigun, and well, a lot of Japanese animation does it, where the characters turn into these little cartoon characters when they're angry, or their heads grow, and smoke comes out of their ears, or I don't know, whatever it is. And it's very expressive and very off model. But then there's the times when it's very on model, and so I really liked the idea of kind of pushing that with my own art, and allowing that to happen. And so, for instance, it creates, even though this drawing of the character Dino is just a normal drawing of him standing there, it's I wouldn't, this wouldn't have been approved in like that Mattel situation, because he definitely, even though he looks cool, he definitely wouldn't be on model. Like his arm would kind of looks Popeye-ish, and I mean, actually there's a lot of pieces of his clothes that, even though I should know what they're really supposed to look like, I've purposely never figured it out. Like his collar, like I keep it like unrefined so that I can change it as whenever I want. And so yeah, you can say that there's a continuity problems with their clothes and his bandages and the holes on his knees and Vanna's outfit, but I don't want that to slow. I don't want that to. How do I say it? I don't want that to be a priority. Like if the way the clothes fit on the body and stuff change over time, I'm not as concerned with it. Or if certain things are different from scene to scene, as long as it's not like, he has a bandage on the left arm that covers his whole arm, and then the next frame it's on his right arm, and then it flips back and forth. I even mess up with that, but I don't really. I try to design my characters so that there's not something like that can make me stumble over. And Remind was a great example of a character, the cat's suit. There were so many scenes where I drew it the wrong way, and I would have to go in and fix it later. And that's just the way. That's just the way it is. But anyway, so all this mumbling is to say that I am a big believer that little continuity things don't matter, and it's more about drawing an image that is really impactful. And if that means this, a character may look a little bit different from panel to panel, if they're hitting their emotional beats, that's what satisfies me. And there's other artists that have done this too. Sam Keith, he's one of my favorite artists from the 90s that he did the Max, and he's still doing comics to this day, still really stylized, and his stuff is just an example of, even more than mine, of just like whatever looks cool goes. And his characters will completely change how they look from panel to panel. But there's enough uniqueness in the characters, their character traits, and how they're dressed and how they look, that you can still recognize who's who real easily. You're not confused with about that. But he's really just, it seems like from my perspective, he's really just concerned with the characters looking uh, interesting panel per panel. And I mean, I'm sure I'm sure he's worked with model sheets and stuff in the past, but in the past, I'm sure he's worked with model sheets. He probably still does, but it's just basically a generic guide that you can kind of reference. But still, like when he draws Batman, it does not look like any other Batman you've seen, you know. And I think a lot of artists kind of start embracing that nowadays. Um, but they might approach it as in, this is my style, that my characters look this way or that way. But actually changing that style from panel to panel is a whole another thing. So, you know, you can see it a lot with my work when someone gets angry or something, like maybe they don't even have a nose because it's just scribbles, you know. And you know, that's hugely influenced because of Japanese animation and manga. But you know, and you have to also, you know what your character's supposed to look like before you can change it and break those rules. So it's a perfect example of know the rules so that you can break them, or know the rules before you can break them. So anyway, so now that I kind of got Dino, the male character, in there, I'm just working the background a little bit, or the monster thing again, trying to finish that out, just so that, you know, just so that it fits together. The foreground fits nicely over top of the background, and there's no tangents between the two. Just making sure it fits in there nicely. And doesn't compete. And there's going to be a nice separation in the coloring mode as well. When I start coloring this, I'll be able to separate foreground from the background. And so that will help, you know. I'll probably shut up a little bit pretty soon, and I'll just probably be quiet for a little bit as we are finishing off this drawing. Maybe I'll chime back in while we're working on Vana the girl. She's always fun to draw, and her hair is always fun to draw. So I'll finish this up, and then I'll start talking again in a little bit. All right, this is more or less just experimenting. I'm I'm pretty new to Clip Studio, and so I would like to get really comfortable with it as far as coloring and shading and textures and all that stuff. But I I I'm not yet there. I'm really used to Photoshop for coloring, and but anyway, I just wanted to kind of throw in some mood and experiment with lighting, now, just to kind of see if how it's feeling, and so and obviously it's not gonna be that dark. I just painted over everything, and then I lightened that layer so that it's about 50%, and it just helps to separate it from the foreground from the background. It looks like there's some holes in Dino that I need to fill in. There we go. The little textured gray spots, like, don't even worry about that. That's not really very important, but it's light enough that it disappears, kind of. So let's start working on the girl. You notice I kind of left the background white in that area just so that I can still see the background imagery, but I'm not drawing on black, or So again, I'm not really looking at any model sheets. I've drawn Vana enough to where I feel like I kind of know what I like and don't like about how she looks. And her outfit has actually changed a little bit. Like, she doesn't have the boots anymore. She doesn't have the black underclothes that are full body down her arms and legs. Instead, now she has these kind of striped leggings that she got from this other character. And I don't even explain that in the book, but I think a smart audience would assume where she got them. So I'm just kind of blocking this in. I don't know if this will end up being the sketch layer or the final layer, so it kind of just depends on how easy it is to draw this in the moment. A lot of times, when I think I'm going to do the final lines, it ends up being, a sketch, and I have to go over it again to do the final lines. And then sometimes when I think I'm just doing the sketch, it ends up being the final lines. Like Dino, I think he's pretty much good to go in my opinion. So, even my inks are really scribbly at times. So this version of Dino looks pretty good to me. So we will see where this one goes. I don't know if I'll have to redo this a bunch or if I'll be able to figure it out this pass. A lot of it is a willingness to do it, to draw over it, though. When I was in storyboards for 6 years, that's the thing I learned was, well, everybody used tracing paper. So, and the reason you use tracing paper, and this is all before computers started, everyone was able to bring an iPad to work and draw on an iPad, which I would assume is how storyboarding is now. But it was all done on paper, and you used photocopies and photocopiers and all that stuff. So the thing, though, is everyone used tracing paper because you could just do a rough sketch of all your stuff, lay a piece of tracing paper over it, and do another sketch over top of that and clean it up. And then you could keep doing that until it looked beautiful or good enough. And so through that process, is how I learned how important it is to just be willing to draw over it again. I'm just blazing through this hair because I've drawn this hair enough to where I realize now that it's kind of just neat shapes. I kind of treat them like the same way I treat cloud shapes when I've drawn clouds on some panels, but it's really just kind of throwing in a shape, throwing some definition lines into it to kind of give a feeling of which way it's flowing. And sometimes I have to cut out lines and cut out of it and add back into it or draw something over top, so. But man, the hair is just really fun. Like I start kind of with a basic shape on the outline, and then I just kind of fill it in and see how I can break up that shape with the lines to make it look like it's folding and twisting. And these scenes with the girl that I'm currently working on, I'm treating her hair as if it's underwater, and so it kind of can flow up and kind of have more of a mind of its own. I guess you could say it's a lot like how Todd McFarlane talked about Spawn's cape, like how it's almost alive. So that's kind of what how I'm envisioning her hair now. Like no one's hair is going to really seriously do that. I mean, maybe if they are reacting really hard, their hair would like flop up in the air for a moment, but panel after panel, I'm making her hair look crazy like this. So, and see, here's where I'm actually cutting pieces out. So I added stuff in, then I'm cutting it out to kind of fill out that shape a little bit more. And then going back in and pushing lines back into it. It's really a push and pull process with the hair. See how I did that? I created a shape first, and then I drew the lines into the shape to try to play with how that shape actually moves in three-dimensional space. There's some artists that just do hair so neat, and I've always been a big admirer of people who can draw hair really well. And some people, I don't even know the name of this artist, but I follow him or saw him on Instagram, and they draw hair almost like to where it almost looks like pieces of cloth. And it's just really neat looking, but it really works. It doesn't. You don't have to draw strands of hair. You could actually make it look like sheets of cloth if you want, as long as it has the right feeling, And so in a way, I think that's kind of how I've been treating Vana. Is just like her hair is kind of like almost like clouds, If you look at my book Remind, especially Volume 2, there's a cloud scene at the very start, and that's quite kind of where I started doing this kind of technique with clouds that are drawn this way, similarly to how I'm doing the hair. And actually, I got it from Mobius. There's some of his drawings where he just put all these interesting lines inside the clouds to build out the shape. And I just really fell in love with how that looked. So that's why I'm doing it. So this is kind of like layers and layers on top of layers. And eventually it starts taking shape in a really interesting way. give her this nice little bean type shaped head. A friend of mine in animation, this guy named Philip Pignotti, kind of clued me into that whole shape. There's a lot of artists that use it that I've noticed now that I've embraced it. I use it especially on distant profile shots with little kids, and then 3/4 where they're looking away from you. I don't do it quite as much for other angles, just because from the front, I like her to have this real squared jaw. But it works really nice for recognizing her head and the direction she's looking really quickly with just a couple lines. You guys, if you are patrons, $5 and up, there is a Discord forum where I am. Well, let's see. Let me just look at it. It's called. Obviously, it's only for the patrons, but there's a thread or a channel called Share Your Work, and I encourage you to post your artwork, or even if you're doing a music video or making songs or writing novels or whatever it is. That's why I said share your work instead of share your art. And I just encourage you to link to your stuff, share it there. It's a very exclusive community of people, and it's not open to the public, and I'll see it as well. And I'd love to see what you're doing. So if you are a patron, please head on over there and post some of your stuff. I just got a notification that so someone just posted their comic on Webtoons called Seeker's Log, which is really neat looking. Anyway, so thank you guys for joining me on Patreon and being part of Discord. Back to Vonna. So yeah, here's her little tights. They're kind of like little leggings, striped leggings. And one thing I've been doing a lot recently is making her legs not really have feet, and I would say I got that from Stephen. Why can't I think of his last name? Space Boy, Stephen McCraney. He draws these simple characters, and they don't have feet, but they, the girls, I guess. But it looks great, and it for whatever reason works. So I started kind of experimenting with that, especially recently, and so it's weird. It's one of those things where the style just changes, and I don't know if it's good or bad, but I like how it looks, especially on these scenes, and especially in these scenes where she is in the condition that she's in. It makes more sense if you know the story, and I don't want to. If you don't know the story, I don't want to give it away. So, oh my goodness. I'm cornering myself. Okay. Anyway, so it's just an example of the model sheets kind of changing and evolving. Early on in the comic, she had these big old boots, and her feet, her boots basically got bigger and bigger and bigger because they just looked cooler and cooler. And then she got rid of the boots, and so she had these kind of gnarly feet in book 4 when they're stranded in the desert on the sand island, the hand-shaped island. And then when she got these leggings, I didn't really want to give her new shoes, so I just figured, I want to make it obscure enough to where no one really cares. And so that's when I started making her feet almost like points. Like once she took off these giant boots, she has like little points for feet. When it's needed. And so, anyway, it's just it's just kind of fun to keep it interesting. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to keep it interesting for myself, you know? Um, and I understand that people will potentially read this whole story in maybe even a sitting, one sitting. Um, and so I'm not sure how it's going to come across, but I think there's enough um, continuity with everything else that will keep it tied together to where it won't be too distracting. Um, and I feel like, it's the same thing that happens with comic books. Like comics, they change the artists, sometimes even in the same issue. And it doesn't really seem to ruin anything. Like, unless you really love the artist that you're reading the comic by, and then there's pages where it's by another artist, and you're like, it's not the same. Which sometimes that's how it is for me. But in this case, it's the same artist. I'm doing it all. It's just I'm slightly, experimenting with the style as it goes. So I don't think it's going to really take away from anything. And I did the same thing with Remind as well. In book 2, I started breaking my earlier rules of my rules were that I would use pencil for the inks. I wouldn't do any inks, and um, make those pencil lines, adjust them in Photoshop so that they look like inks. And by the end of book 2, I was kind of burnt out doing that, and so I started actually inking with a Pentel brush pen. And so I have a bunch of pages in book 2 that are inked. And I was worried that people would be like, this looks different. But because it's all drawn by the same artist, and I was still the same colorist, I used my same textures and my same, compositions and all that stuff. No one has ever said anything about it. And in fact, I'm the only one who brings it up, and even so, people don't. They're like, oh, yeah, I can kind of see what you're saying, but, it's been, it's flowed just fine. So, anyway, I'm kind of I'm arguing about something that no one's has a problem with, so I don't know why I'm talking about it. So let's just try to get some lighting, some real general lighting in there, and I'll just use a big airbrush type thing. And again, I'm using Clip Studio, and I'm not really familiar or used to using it for coloring, so. Whoop, not that one. So I don't even know what some of these brushes look like, what some of these things look like. So I guess technically we're officially into the coloring stage, even though this is still black and white. And you'll notice with my work, as with these process videos especially, that I kind of throw in things and then I adjust it later. So when I'm coloring especially, I'll throw in big old blotches of a color or a gradient, and then I will experiment with how, transparent that is, or what color it is, or what filter it is even. And a lot of it's because with coloring, I'm not the kind of colorist where I pick a color and I paint it on the screen and it's exactly the color I want it to be in that area. I'm more the kind of colorist where I just, I don't know what I'm looking for until I see it. And that's always annoying when you're working for someone who doesn't know what they want until they see it. There's a lot of directors like that. But since I'm the one doing the work, I don't feel quite as bad about it. And so I just experiment. It's a lot of experimenting. You do undo an awful lot, just like I'm doing now. Hit that Control Z over and over again. And maybe I'm embracing that because I never really learned to color professionally uh, in a traditional way. My coloring has basically always been digital. At least the coloring where I'm doing it for a living. I've tried experimented with painting paintings and all that stuff, but I never felt like I've really been very good at it, or I never enjoyed it. So I never put in the time because I just didn't enjoy it. But I enjoy digital coloring, and so I've put in the time, to learn it. And because of that, it comes with all these things like undo and being able to dial around layers and stuff. And so I've just embraced that from the start. So I encourage you, if you are starting out, and you can see I'm actually deleting some of her hair here because compositionally it was kind of fighting it didn't give her the motion that I wanted. Anyway, so if you're new and you're starting out and there's no reason for you to learn traditional, like and you don't enjoy traditional, totally embrace that and just go for it with the digital stuff, because there's no reason to learn. Let me turn some of this background noise down. There's no reason to learn how to paint if you're never going how to paint with oils if you're never going to paint with oils, right? I mean, there's nuances and tricks you can learn, but there's nuances and tricks digitally that you will never be able to translate over to oils very well. You might, but and I'm not arguing against it either. If you love, what I'm saying is, if you love doing a certain technique, then embrace it and try to incorporate it into what you're doing. But if you don't love it, then who cares what all the experts say about that technique? Don't do it. Because if you don't love it, then don't do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're doing this stuff because there's a part of you that's doing it because you love it. There's another part of you that's doing it maybe because you want to tell the world something. And then there's another part of you that does something because it's enjoyable. Like the act of drawing this stuff is actually enjoyable. And I think the worst thing you can do is corner yourself into this place to where you're working in a style and technique, and all the tools you're using are things that you don't really enjoy. And a good example of that is like 2D animators who are switching over and doing everything computer animated, like with 3D models, and they're not drawing anymore. They are kind of cornering themselves into a career that they didn't want to get into. Now, some of them enjoy it, and so they've made that they've made that transition happily, and they're excelling at it because they love it. It's just a new challenge for them, and it's a new venture. But then there's a lot of people that are doing it, but you can tell they hate it, and they're regretting it, and their job is just a job. They're going in, they're just paying the bills. And so I hate the idea of being that kind of artist. And so I always fight against that. And so I really try to challenge people not to follow the path that other people tell them to follow because it's what they should do and everyone else knows better than you do and all that stuff. But if you're really enjoying a certain technique or watercolors or whatever it is, embrace it. You could be the one that brings an interesting technique to the market with maybe a real old technique or whatever. So anyway, sorry to get off on a tangent there. All right, now the moment we've all been waiting for. Color. Color. Okay, so I got these textures that I've created over the years, And I just fast forwarded through that part of me digging around for textures. This texture, you should be able to get it on this in this package, whether you got this on Gumroad or Patreon. I will include this texture. And just so you know, I have all my textures on Gumroad as well. And if you're a $20 backer, you can get access to all those for free as well. So this texture is one I don't use very often because it's very specific. And sometimes I like to use it when, I thought it would work great for clouds, but the thing is it's one cloud shape. So what I should have done is painted a really big cloud all the way around, and then I could have rotated it and used different sides of it. But I wasn't thinking when I created this texture. And so here we are. So I was thinking this cloud shape could be kind of like dust, kind of like a door opens and dust kind of pushes off to the sides. So that's why I'm trying to imitate with this texture. And so obviously I've just rotated it, transformed it, Command T on a Mac in Photoshop. Oh yeah, and I'm in Photoshop now, you guys. Surprise, surprise. Just because I'm familiar with Photoshop with coloring. Here is another texture I'm going to use. This one will also be included in the package for this Gumroad file. And this one I'm going to just use for the background, just to kind of continue the texture off the top of the page. That's right, those are my kids in the background. I don't know if you can hear them. They are playing with Legos. So it's going to get a little tricky as I try to use kind of this foreground smoke texture and then the background texture. But for now, I'm not worried about how they line up perfectly just yet. And so basically I'm just copying and pasting or duplicating this texture, slightly rotating it, and just sliding it around so that it doesn't look very duplicated if possible. And I have the textures in a folder. They're all on darken mode. That way all the white areas kind of end up blending into each other. And only the places where the textures are is what shines through. And then I have all those textures in a folder, and that group, that folder, I have it set to overlay. That's my usual process for textures. Now, as you can see, I just collapsed all those background textures. I just did a Command E to just collapse those, merge those layers all together. A lot of times I just merge them. If I'm not sure if I'm content with the textures, I'll keep them separated. But in this case, I didn't see any problems with how this texture was, so I just merged them real quickly. I'm still debating on those foreground textures, the cloud ones, if I'm going to use it. And what I'm doing right now is I'm taking that glow, that light glow that I had, that I created in Clip Studio, which is just a big airbrush, and I just did a Command U, which is pulled up hue saturation for that layer, and I just hit the colorize button and I pushed a little blue into it. And then I'm doing the same thing with with the textures by right now. Command U brings up hue saturation. I'm not hitting the colorize button on this one because I don't want to strip out all those color variations. And what I want to do is just emphasize it. Now, you can do this with just a filter down at the bottom. You can, at the bottom of your layers panel, you can select a filter with hue saturation and just attach it to the layer. That way you're not baking it into the layer. But it depends on how confident I am with my decision if I do that or not. If I'm not sure if it's what I want to do, I'll do it with a filter. But if I'm really sure that I want to go that direction, I'll just do it right there on the texture. So now is a matter of figuring out if we can use these other kind of cloud-like textures, if there's a way to make them work. I'm going to pull them out of the folder that the other textures are in because I need to do a different um, mode. This I believe that's called the mode, where it says screen or normal or overlay. So I need to figure out a different mode for it that's not my normal coloring thing, which is to put everything on overlay, because I want that I don't want that texture to just be a subtle background element. I want it to be kind of pretty strong in the foreground, and so you can really see that paint textures. And what I'm doing right now is I'm using the cloning tool. On the left hand side you'll see it highlighted, my cloning tool, and I have kind of a textured brush, and I'm just kind of trying to clone in more of that smoke texture. That I'm grabbing a swatch where to clone it from, and then I am cloning it into places where it needs to be. Well, cloning it into places where it's white, where the border of the texture is. And usually I don't do this with my coloring, just because I like to keep as much of the textures preserved the way that I created them. But in this case, I didn't really know a way to, I didn't want to paint a new texture basically, which is kind of what I'd have to do to get exactly what I was going for, what I wanted to go for. So I just decided I'll just clone this out and just kind of build out what I need, basically. So here's another texture. This one is one I rarely use because it's so obvious when I use it. So in this case, I'm going to kind of use it, but it'll be subtle in the background, so it won't be obvious. But it has such a nice grittiness to it that I figured it could, and it has a lot of the same colors, so I figured it could possibly work here. So I'm going to just try to blend these two together, see what happens. And as you can see, I've put it on darken, just like I do with most of the textures. And that way it kind of blends into the other textures. All the whites disappear when you position it in front of or behind another color. It kind of, I don't know how to explain it. It's kind of like multiply, but the darkest colors are the ones that shine through. So, and I'm just duplicating it, rotating it to try to get rid of those areas where it looks like it's repeating, which is a big, it's just, to me that's important. I don't want it to look like it's just the same texture over and over again. So, and I'm kind of erasing out with a big eraser, big fuzzy eraser, areas that that I don't want to look like they're duplicated. And I feel like that's pretty good. Like the textures are covering everything nicely. So now it's just a matter of knocking it all down. So it's subtle, it's there, but it's not just punching you in the face with texture. But at least now there's some grittiness there to work with, So now it's kind of a matter of separating out more of the stuff. Right now it feels really monochromatic. And when you turn that off, you can actually see that blue shine through. So now it's a matter of figuring out how to make that blue shine through still. And I just flatten those background textures together now. Those new textures that I brought in, I just flatten that group together. So I have the I have 3 different kind of textures that I'm using right now, and I'm kind of just manually blending them. You know, I turn things on and off just to see, does this texture look better or not, or maybe it should be the opacity knocked down on it. I don't know, you know. And so that black and white layer there on the folder is a mask, and it just, you know, everything that's black is opaque, and everything that's white is transparent. I believe that's the way it works with masks. And again, I'm turning things on and off just to see if something stands out to me. All this at this phase, it's all an experiment. Nothing is really set in stone yet with this one. I'm thinking, do I want him to be a red character, or is this just the red lighting of the room? What kind of contrasts in these colors can I use? And a lot of times when you're doing color, you're staring at a color for quite a while, and you don't realize it, but your eyes are actually, you're kind of burning those colors into your eyes. You know how when you look at a picture, stare at it for a long time, and then you close your eyes, you see the inversion of that picture? Or if you look at a white wall, and after you look at that picture, you see the opposite? Well, it's the same thing, but with colors. So you're burning those colors into your retina or whatever it is. And so sometimes it's good to, this is why it's great to walk away from a painting for a little bit and then come back. You instantly see different things. You instantly see the colors differently because you're not, you haven't been staring at them for that long. And so it's not actually physically changing the way you're looking at it. So that's a weird thing to deal with. I don't know how to necessarily deal with it other than turn things on and off, just so you can kind of see alternative ideas and see if, you know, see if there's something there that you didn't see before because your eyes were actually looking at it skewed because you were looking at a red color for too long. So right now I am trying to figure out the light source. I want to just have a nice hard light source on this creature because basically they're stepping out of this illuminated doorway, this elevator, and it's casting light onto this thing, this creature. And so there's probably a lot of different ways I could have done this, but I'm just basically cutting out these shape, the light source shape with the lasso tool right now. And partially it's because I want the characters to stand out more than they are. I haven't started coloring them yet, so once I throw some color on there and some lighting on the characters, that will help. And this light source is just basically like a baby blue color, a light blue color, and it's set to linear dodge. And that always does some interesting, fun things with lighting on linear dodge. And it's just experimenting now. Like, does it look better with overlay? Does it look better with color dodge, linear, lighter? You know, what are all these things? Screen. You know, I'm just kind of going through them. And you know what? I know there's a hotkey to shift through these, but I can't figure it out for the life of me. I can figure it out on a PC, but I can't remember how to do it on a Mac. I don't know why. So maybe if you guys know, send me a message if you guys know how to do that. Just like a keystroke to go through these. I know on a PC it's just pushing up and down. You select one of them and you can push up, 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 and it kind of cycles through them. It's really nice for testing out which mode you want to be on. So as you can see, I'm still debating what I want. I really don't know what the answer is yet. A lot of times I have trouble streaming myself when I'm coloring because um, a lot of the times I am just sitting there looking at the screen, trying to figure out what I want to do with it. In this case, it was a pretty specific direction that I wanted, and so I felt a little bit more confident recording myself do it. But even so, there's a lot of second guessing and trying things out, and time spent like thinking about it. I mean, I'll stop recording and spend some time away from it and then come back at it and start recording again. So even though this video is what, 3 hours, 3.5 hours, um, this basically took me all day to do it. It was a pretty much a full day experience, but recording a video and stuff takes time too. Something kind of clicked here when I realized I just wanted to make this light source diagonal. It really kind of started feeling right immediately as soon as I started doing that. And keep pushing the wrong button here on this lasso. What I'm doing is I'm manipulating the mask, which is black and white. And so I'm selecting an area and I'm hitting Command Delete or Option Delete based on which foreground or background color I want to use. And so what I'm doing is I'm accidentally hitting the wrong button. So I use the wrong button, then it deletes white instead of black. So anyway, and now I'm just using the paintbrush tool to I'm painting on that mask again. So it's that light source layer, but I'm painting the mask. So it's not actually destroying my light source, and I can paint that mask on and off until I get it the way I want it. And so I'm just trying to paint like what would a light source look like if it was shining onto this foggy mist. I'm just trying to visualize that and experiment with it and paint that mask so that it looks like that. And I think it's looking pretty good. I really like how that feels now, especially with it fading at the edges. And then that diagonal light across his face is looking good. So I'm really satisfied with how that's looking. And so what I realize is to get rid of this monochromatic feel of this character, I just need to kind of go in there and what they call flat these other areas. So in this case, it's the horns. I want to kind of give them a different color so that there's more than just that flat red color to work with. So I made a new layer, titled it Horns. I'm setting it on, trying to figure out what mode to put it on. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe I'll do overlay. Overlay is kind of looking the best. It has that color, but it's still somehow preserving that texture really nicely. So I'm just quickly going in there, and I mean, you can see how quickly I'm moving. I'm just going in there, selecting the horns, and hitting probably Command Delete, either that or Option Delete, depending on, I'm sorry, I don't know which one actually does the foreground and background color. And I'm just filling in those horn colors with this color that is set to overlay. And you can already see how it's already breaking up the monochromatic look of that red color. And it's nice because it's kind of blending with some of the blues that are in the texture down in the lower right hand corner. It's kind of fitting with that nicely. You can see how quickly it starts looking like, wow, this is a painting, even though it's not. It's just painted textures and then a couple really simple colors, you know, which is what's so exciting for me about working digitally. It's like there's so many things you can do that may be really a quick procedure, but they have such an amazing result. Yeah. I'm just going to go in there with the brush and just manually paint a couple little areas. Hit it with that blue. It may not be a horn, but just kind of painting it into the fur in certain areas. It's almost turning into like a almost a shadow layer too. You can almost use it as a shadow layer now. As things go back in the distance, they turn more blue. So I'll just do that with the legs. Actually, I'll kind of use the same layer that I'm doing with the same color I'm using with the horns, but just to kind of push these legs back. I really like how that's looking. See, this is a good example of contrast in hue. You know, there's obviously the real hard contrast with the light and then the non-lit areas, but this is another level of contrast with the color selection. You know, I could have just used, you know, a black, and just made it so that the legs that are in the background go more black, but playing with the contrast of the colors is a fun way to help it to not get muddy. You know, there's that term for when things get muddy, everything kind of just starts feeling like it's blending together and nothing really pops anymore. And so yeah, that's really starting, it's finally starting to really take shape now in my mind. And again, just clicking things on and off just to kind of see what is standing out. Do I want to split the difference? Like I put it, like here's a good example of me putting a filter over top of that texture, because now I'm starting to second guess. What do I want to do with this texture? So I put a filter on it and I'm kind of keep going back to it, sliding it around. Oh, maybe I want it more red. Maybe I don't want it red. Maybe I do. Maybe I'll get rid of it altogether. Sorry about that last hour or so of recording. It was all mono out of one side of your speakers. So this is all stereo. It should be anyway. So what I'm doing right now is I'm continuing to go in and work on that mask for the light source. And I'm just using the lasso tool, cutting out more pieces just to kind of create a shadow layer, so it looks like a shadow layer. I kind of do this on pretty much everything that I work on pretty much these days. I did it with Remind, and I've pretty much done it with SITHRAH most of the time. Usually it's either a shadow pass or it's a highlight, a light source pass. And it really fleshes out the scenes, in my opinion, when you just kind of go in there and use that lasso tool to just kind of cut away at things. It just really brings more shape to your drawings. So that's all I'm doing. And you can see it's pretty quick. I don't sit here and spend a ton of time noodling it. I mean, I am going through the hairs, so I guess it's not just like a super quick line, but that's a pretty quick mask, Doesn't take much, really, is what I'm saying. And it goes a long way on things like it'll go a long way with these teeth. Just kind of getting a nice shadow layer in there and figure out, you know, what's going to be highlighted and what's not. And the gums. Oh. Excuse me, I'm hiccuping. So you can see sometimes I'm hitting Command Delete and sometimes Option Delete, depending on if I want to take out the shadow or add it. So once you get comfortable, once you get into a rhythm, it's pretty quick. You know, your fingers are, your thumbs, well, in my case, my thumb is on Command or Option, and my pointer finger is on Delete, and I'm just going through and I just hit it, and then when I know I want to delete something, I move it to the other one and hit Delete. And if I want to add it, I hit it, move it to my thumb to the other one and hit Delete. It ends up going pretty fast. But these are all like hotkeys that you kind of just got to get used to. Got to get comfortable with it, you know. And once you start kind of getting into that mode and you're not thinking about it anymore, that's when you really find yourself cruising through this stuff. And I've been doing this kind of selection tool lighting pass technique for years now, since Remind, since probably 2013 or I'm sorry, 2003 or 2004 is when I really started. Well, no, when I started coloring it, it was probably 2005 or 6. I don't know. Man, that seems like a long time ago now. So I guess I would say I'm kind of used to it. And then, you know, working at DreamWorks, they really, I learned their lasso technique as well. And so I think, and that's where I learned the Command or Option Delete shortcut for filling in space. And so that really speeded me up as well. And right now I'm just using the airbrush tool to just paint a gradient of that on that mask. And so it's slowly grading between the light and the dark, and it creates a nice effect. So now we're going to work on the characters' colors, and I'm just going to do kind of some basic flatting. I have the characters on their own layer already, and usually I have the lines separate, and then the fill on another layer behind it. But in this case, I did it all in Clip Studio, so I'm just nothing fancy this time. I'm basically just making sure everything's solid. There's no holes in it. I'm just using a regular paintbrush to just kind of finish painting it in. So this isn't necessarily a good flatting technique, but like if this were a professional flat, this would definitely not be the way you would approach it. So what I'm going to do is just select really quickly with the lasso tool the shirt section, and I'm going to just fill it in as a shirt color, and you can see I'm adding and cutting away at it. Grab this shirt color. It's over top of it, so I'm going to turn this on to multiply. And again, this isn't necessarily the way I do it. Usually I have the line work on top of the color, but in this case I was like, you know what, it doesn't matter. I'll just get this done quickly. So and now I'm kind of going in and cleaning up some of the lines a little bit, just so that it's not totally sloppy. Oops, I didn't mean to just delete it, put a hole in it. I need to fill it white. There we go. See, I'm just putting all the colors on one layer called character colors. Blue hair. Might have to add just a little bit. Just work on this shape just a little bit more so it's not quite as sloppy looking for his hair. Oops, what's going on here? Sorry, technical difficulties. Now I'm going to just work on these band-aids, which just slap in a kind of a light blue, which is a nice shadow pass for white, you know? So these bandages are white. They're supposed to be white. Or the gauze or whatever it is. Or the arm wraps, whatever they're called. And so, since it's in the shadows, I'm just making it a light blue color and actually kind of pushing a little green into it with hue saturation, just because that's kind of what the scene is calling for. I can change all these colors later, so I'm not too worried about it. Now I'm just going to select his pants on that same exact layer. Again, it's not really anything fancy that I'm doing. And filling this in that nice blue color. Might have to clean up some of the character layer just so there's no holes in it. Since the clothing color or the character color is what's it called? Where clipping plane. That's it. Clipping plane. So that's, I believe, what it's called when you know, they're on the layer characters here. There's the layer above it with the little arrow that's pointing down to it. That means it's those layers above are on a clipping plane. They're clipped to the character layer. So whatever's on the character layer is the only thing that's actually showing. Everything else is invisible because it's like, if it's not, I don't even know how to explain this. It's kind of hard to explain it, but I think you can see what I'm saying. Like the selection on our hair is huge, right? But when I fill that in, the only thing that's being colored is what's on that character layer. It's not filling in the rest of the area. So anyway. Hopefully I blew you away with how amazing I was able to describe that. Alright, so we're just continuing to do this with her clothes now, Fauna's clothes. Again, this is a real quick and dirty flatting that I'm doing right now. But, you know, I don't think the scene requires any, like, amazing flatting right now, so this is probably what it will be. Yay! Ta-da! Now, so I just made another layer for the skin tone. And I put it underneath the clothes, but you know, it's gonna be problematic just because all these colors are on multiply. So I'll either have to, let's see, what do I want to do? So I I just made a selection, and then I held down, I don't even know what key I held down, Control or Option, and hovered over the character colors layer that I made, and then it deleted the selection where I had already painted, if that makes sense. And then I just filled that in with skin tone. So I'm going to just do a little bit of a color pass over top of everything, kind of like it's a filter, you know. I just filled it all in yellow, just to kind of just see how this works. I don't know if how this is going to really work, but it kind of just added a little hint of yellow to everything. Can dial that color around just a little bit too to see if there's something that looks nicer, that pops better. It looks pretty good with this red, but I don't know. Let's work on these eyes real quick, just to kind of start figuring out what they might look like. Hello? Okay. Yeah, since I didn't have someone flat these, you know, it just means I'm gonna do all the flats myself. And usually when that happens, my flats are kind of sloppy. But usually I only flat stuff myself when it's real simple. You know, like one giant panel. One spread that's a big panel, you know. But if it's a lot of detail, like it just takes me too long to flat stuff, so I usually always send it out to my flatter Aaron Daly. He's been my go-to flatter for half of Remind and all of SITHRAH, actually. So, I'm not really sure what to do with these eyes. I just know I kind of want them to glow red. And I don't know if I want to preserve kind of the ink lines, or if I want to just paint over them and just, you know, at this point I don't know exactly what I'm looking for. I just know I want them to be red, glowing red in the darkness, but it just doesn't quite feel right. It just feels kind of rushed at this point, and so I'm just trying to figure out how to give it a little bit more. So it just means I need to start experimenting. So enjoy the ride as I throw some experiments at this thing and move some layers around and see what happens. So I put some black in there behind because I kind of like the idea of you know black beady eyes, but then they're glowing red somehow. But obviously, I'm not sure or convinced that it's working. So what I'm going to do is just move on to the teeth because I know it's something that needs to be flatted, and it can possibly help me figure out what to do with other things, you know. Whenever I get stuck, I move on to something else, usually that I kind of know what to do with, even though it's more grunt work maybe. It gives me time to kind of fill it out, see what works and what doesn't work. And you know, maybe the tooth color will give me ideas for the eye color, or the gum color will give me ideas. So a lot of times, you know, you just kind of got to keep working on it until you kind of start getting an idea in your mind, a vision for it. And if you don't have a vision for it, then sometimes you just got to keep working on some aspect of it until you start getting ideas, you know. Sometimes those ideas don't come, and you just wrestle with it and struggle with it forever. There's always pages like that where I can seriously come back to it 3 or 4 times and work on it for, you know, hours, and I'm struggling with it every time. And then all of a sudden, something clicks. Usually it's when I'm turning on and off layers and I see something that kind of stands out and makes me go, oh, well, yeah, that looks good. So, but until then, you know, you get as much done as you can that you can control, and then keep coming back to it. Keep trying other things, you know, and eventually I usually see something that kind of stands out to me. There we go. Got those teeth in. Make a new layer. Call this one gums. And since it's behind the teeth, I can kind of be a little bit more sloppy with my selection. Because it only shows up behind the teeth, since the layer's behind the teeth. That little circle's a highlight, so I'll just leave that alone. Oops. I think that's supposed to be a tooth, so I'll add some tooth color to that area. Oh, brother. Yay, I just messed up my tooth layer. Woo! Undo, undo, undo. Undo, 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 and undo. Okay. That's always annoying. Alright, this time we're doing it on the right layer, the gums layer. And now we'll go to the tooth layer, select that same tooth color, and fill in that tooth. That strange tooth. we go. Okay, let's add some shadows into that. Or finish adding the shadows to the rest of it. Even though it might be so subtle you might not notice it, but maybe you will. So we might as well add a little bit more to it. Okay. So I might as well just separate the lines off from these characters now. I use the channels to just make a selection of just the blacks. No. This as a flat layer behind the inks now. So I'm just locking the pixels and then coloring them all white, and then the inks layer is above it now. And that way these colors are not getting so difficult to work with, since they were on multiply above the inks. It kind of made it to where they started competing with each other. So now that everything's on normal mode and it's under the inks layer, I can just have colors on top of each other, and so it allows me to adjust the colors a little bit easier. All right, new layer called Transition Light. Now this is something I kind of learned at DreamWorks, which is when you have a transition from a light palette to a dark palette, or to where transition from where the light source is hitting the character or an object transitioning into the dark, you can usually put the local color there. And the local color means the true color of the object. So in this case, I'm pretending that the character his local color is red, and the white light is blowing out that red in the light area, and the dark shadow is darkening that red in the dark area. But right there at that transition, you actually see the true color. So at least that's kind of like, that's the thought behind it. It doesn't mean it's exactly what's reality in this situation, but especially because I'm coloring all the lines red as well. But I was taught that when you're painting real life, a lot of times that kind of real subtle detail happens in that transition. So there was a lot of situations at DreamWorks where I was doing color keys, and I was told, on Kung Fu Panda to make that transition from the dark and light palette on his fur to be the local color. And it's a cool little effect that really pluses things out. And I think in this case it's going to really help. At least if anything. I mean, in theory, that would mean he's red, but it doesn't have to mean that. It can just be a neat effect that looks cool, obviously, like what I said before. It's like, it's always kind of like just what looks coolest, and I'm blurring that hard line a little bit too, so that it kind of makes it feel more like a transitional spot. And so there you go. Little trick. This is a good little trick that I learned at DreamWorks, so hopefully you guys can use it or enjoy watching it. Either or. Just knocking down some of those red areas in the shadow, so they're not too red, because then otherwise it becomes really obvious what I've done. I guess it, to a trained artist, it's obvious what I've done, but what I'm trying to do is make it so it's not obvious to an untrained eye, which maybe it never is. Maybe it's always magical to an untrained eye, but it's always nice to kind of cover your tracks a little bit with how you did things. But now that you've watched this video, you know exactly how I did it. And you're going, what? He cheated. Alright, it's really starting to take a nice shape now. Or nice feel now, I think, with that. Nice red transition light in there. And coloring the lines red really kind of gives it another level of ominousity. Is that a word? Alright, we'll just keep feathering out this around the edges. Okay, let's try to work on the character color a little bit more. Foreground character color, that is. I'll make a light pass on them with the lasso tool. As you can see, I've created a new layer. I'm just using white to just kind of block in the shape of that light source, that light layer on top of him, the characters. There we go. Do the same thing with the girl. And as you can see, it's pretty sloppy. I'm not really too concerned with making every little detail exactly right. It's more like a, just as long as you can kind of hit it quickly, it's just like a sketch. Your brain fills in the rest. So I'm never really too concerned with making these really, really, perfect. Unless it's a close-up image, I might spend a little bit more time making sure the shapes of these light sources and shadows are accurate. And then I just put that light source on overlay just right now. I'm trying to just figure out, the best way to go about it. I duplicated that light source, and I'm just going to try to adjust it on a different layer, just so that I don't ruin that light source layer that I created. And I used colorize hue saturation on that white, and I just lowered the lightness so that there was actually some color in it. Increased the saturation, and so now it's kind of a red layer that's on. I actually put it on linear dodge, so I'm kind of going back and forth between the two just to see what I like best. And sometimes I duplicate up a shadow or a light source layer and put one of those layers on blur it slightly, and then when I turn on the other one, sometimes that combination works really well together. So I'm going to try that right now and see what that looks like, if it fits or not. It may not work. A lot of times that hard edge, that hard line is really nice. So we will see what happens when I dial this around. So I just keep going back and forth, adjusting the sliders on the opacity. And I've made up my mind. I like that layer on top with linear dodge without the feathered, without the blurred outline. So I'm just keeping it at 100%. 100%. It's kind of that reddish color. So I do that a lot. I try a couple variations, click around, beat back and forth, and then when I finally kind of feel like, yeah, I like that one best, I'll throw away the other one. This just so I don't keep second guessing it. Sometimes if you keep all your options, you spend a lot of time just second guessing them. Now to try to like figure out these eyes again. The question is, how do I want these eyes to feel? What am I trying to get out of these eyes? I'm kind of looking for like a beady eye type look. Just trying to get that red color around on the, what is it? Trying to get that red color to be solid. The way I painted it, it was kind of transparent on the lines. So now I selected those lines and then just filled them all in solid. But I don't necessarily want the wrinkle marks to be red, so I'm trying, even though I'm failing, I'm just trying to make those more black. So the eyes themselves are red. The ink work on the actual eyes are red, but then the wrinkle part around the eyes are not red. They're black. Primarily in the shadows. In the light source area, those will be red as well. But I think I'm going to have to get some reference for this too. I'm not... Sometimes, okay, a friend of mine at DreamWorks, Ron, I don't even know how to pronounce his last name, Ronald Kernawan, I think his name is pronounced. He would tell me, you're only as good as your reference. And he would gather reference for days and pretty much build a whole painting with reference material. Just cut and paste. It would be like a collage, and then he would paint over it. And his paintings were amazing, very creative, very unique. But he did everything with reference. So I don't work that way to where I have to start with reference, but there's times like this when I am working on something and working on it and trying to figure it out from my imagination, and finally I get to a point where I'm like, okay, I need to just look at a reference and just get ideas, For right now, I'm filling in these eyes so they're solid black. I'm kind of thinking of possibly abandoning these ink lines and filling these in black and trying to just, draw them, like this shape is kind of like the elevator door reflecting in the eyeballs. So I'm going to experiment with that and just see if that works. See if that actually looks right. It might not look right. I'm just trying to select that red color and fill that in with that red color maybe. I guess that would mean there would be the little character silhouettes in the door as well. Kind of round it off a little bit. And each one of these is a slightly different shape, because the eyes kind of at a different angle. Try to get that silhouette a little better. It's not perfect, but it doesn't really matter, it's just as long as it has a clear read. So, does that work? 'Tis the question. I'm not sure. I'm going to try something different. Just more like a highlight, or, you know, around the edge of these eyeballs. So they kind of have that, you know, little beady eye shape to them. And I'm ignoring the other eyes for right now. I'm trying to figure out what I want those eyes that are in the shadow to look like. Maybe the door's a little tiny reflection in there. It looks like he's looking up to the right. All right. Let's try something different. All right. I think it's time to look for some reference. So what you're not seeing here is on the other screen I am going to Google, and I am searching for bird eyes. For whatever reason, I thought a bird eye would be, it kind of has that beady eye look. And I didn't want to go with spider eyes because it would be too common, I think. And it would also change the way this creature looked. So I found this one, and it really didn't take me long. I mean, that was real time how long it took me to find it. So this one is really neat because I like the red in there. I like the texture. I'm probably not going to use the texture. I like how it's around the edges is this kind of like fleshiness of the skin. And so anyway, I'm going to just pull that into my drawing and put it on top of everything just so I can have it as a reference. And it doesn't mean I'm going to copy every aspect of it or try to make this photorealistic. But I just want to use this as kind of inspiration for these eyes. So we'll start with that center piece, that center, what is it, the pupil, not the iris, the pupil, the black part in the middle. We'll just put those in there. Then we'll just fill in the rest solid red. So I'm kind of abandoning my ink lines. I mean, it's already looking better, I think. Might as well just go ahead and fill out these other guys. These other guys. Get it? Eyes, guys. Sorry. Bad joke. That wasn't even a joke. I don't even. Why would I even think that's funny? Throw that away. I don't know what that layer was doing. Okay, moving on. I will figure out what's happening later. How's that sound? Let's fill these in for now. It's a little closer to solid. Let's just go all the way. I guess you could say that I could have looked at this eye reference when I was actually drawing it and inking the page, but yes, and I could have, but you know what? I didn't know that it would be a problem, so I just blasted through that inking phase and figured I'd worry about it now, which, and it seems to be working out all right, you know. Obviously, things would go a lot faster if you knew exactly what you were going to do, but that's never the case. I mean, very rarely it's the case, so we'll just go the speed that we can go. We're almost done with this anyway, so it's just a matter of finishing all the little pieces. Alright, so I need to put black behind that. That's what's going on. Too many layers, huh? Too many layers. There we go. The eye blacks. That's what it is. Duh, I had it clearly marked. It's interesting. I'm kind of going the opposite of what my reference is by having the center white. But now, you know, I mean, it's a lot more simple than I was thinking, and I think I like that, you know. I like how that's looking. I just want to get a little red kind of glow still around that center part. So I'll get a nice feathered airbrush and kind of just glow out that white point. Here we go. Yeah, has a nice. So it's kind of like it's a beady black eye, but it has a kind of a red glow to it, which makes it you kind of wonder, are these red eyes, glowing red eyes, or is the light source red? I don't know. That maybe that's what you're wondering, maybe not. Now I'm gonna just try to put kind of a little bit of effect over the eyes that are in the dark. So I just kind of filled that all in with that red. I'm going to put that above everything and put this on linear dodge and just see what happens. Let's see. I didn't do that. I thought I did all these black. I thought we already fixed all these eyes like this. Oh well. Back to it. Add a little bit of a wrinkle there where it seems like it could have a wrinkle. Huh. Yeah, let's just knock all that down. I don't think we need that actually. Okay. I'm going to just try to not exactly imitate that detail around the bird eye, but just kind of just put in some shapes of shadows around those eyes, because I just like how crusty that looks. I mean, it's really crazy how that bird eye looks. It's just like so many weird little folds and wrinkles and stuff. So anyway, I'll do this right now. solid, and it's, you know, it's not going to look very good because it's a solid dark layer, but I'm just kind of letting it be solid so that I can see the shapes and details real easily. I'm using the lasso tool to just cut out pieces and add pieces and just put that get that detail in there quickly. You know, you could use a paintbrush and whatever, but the lasso tool just makes such a nice hard line. And then I'll just lower the opacity on that. I put it on multiply. That way it's there, but it's not super, super dark. It's not hogging your attention. And so it kind of has that feeling, but not, you know, not, I didn't go all the way with it, of course. So yeah, see, that turned out a lot more simple than I thought it would with those eyes. But you know, even though I went kind of the opposite of that reference, it was that reference that really helped me see what I was not wanting to do, and it kind of helped me with the feeling that I wanted to achieve with it. So yes, I like it. I think it's working. Okay, so I want to kind of push a little bit more blue into the shadows of the creature. So I just made a new layer called blue color, and I just got a blue color and I'm just painting it over top of the creature, and I have that layer set to color mode. And so because it's set on color mode, everything underneath that layer is taken on that color that I paint. So all the textures are remaining, all the nuance of everything is just the color is being shifted to the blue color that I paint. I probably won't go quite that blue, but put it on there, and we can turn down the opacity a little bit so that it's definitely there with the horns, and it really has a nice color contrast now. So let's make another layer, and let's put this over top of the background character, the creature. And I just want to paint a little bit of a kind of a fog, a mist over, you know, kind of to contrast with the color of the blue, more into the foreground. So it's just this really orangish color on linear dodge, which really always affects the darks a lot. Just hit it in different places, you know, where the light is hitting it. And then you can adjust the hue saturation of that whole level, that whole layer, just to kind of experiment with it to just see what stands out most, you know, what really pops when you dial it around. Not really sure if I want to go blues or warms or cools with it. Greens or blues or yellows. I think I want to kind of keep it more in the warm color tones, especially because it's kind of where the light is hitting. Just seeing the difference between that glow being over top of the characters or under the characters. I think I'll leave it over top of the characters, actually. And then we're just making a clipping plane on the characters' inks, just to kind of color the inks a little bit so they're not just black. They're kind of a bluish, a real dark bluish. Oh, that's interesting, actually. It's kind of good to really darken them, even though they're hit by a light source from the back. It's hard because, you know, I want them to pop out, but I want them to pop out from the creature, but I also want them to be hit from the back with a light source. So what do I want to sacrifice more? Do I want to sacrifice that light source from the back? Because I don't think I want them to be really blown out as much as the creature. Otherwise, they're going to take away from that blown out effect on the creature. So it's kind of a little experiment, just moving around some of these layers and filters on the characters just to see what really works, or what works best, you know. Right now I'm kind of still kind of debating pushing a little bit of blues into their shadows, or reds maybe. I do like that, having the blues, almost the blues matching the creature top, matching the character bottoms. And just turning off different textures to see what things stand out to me. I duplicated this texture and pull it on top because I kind of want to put a little bit more texture into the background. A lot of times I like to have solid blacks on my paintings, but in this case I do want some sort of texture in the background. What I did was I just hit Command I to invert that texture, so it inverted it from that red to the kind of like this aqua blue, this cyan blue color. And I put it on lighten, and I'm just playing with opacity now over top of the background inks. And it's just neat to have some sort of texture in that dark area, which was just solid black. I'm debating, if I want to have it kind of vignetted a little bit, or maybe like that, where it's kind of more textures as it goes off. And I'm undoing, I do stuff and then I undo it, try something else, undo it. Yes, I like that too. I don't know. Turn it on and off, and let's see what we like best. And as you can see, I'm manipulating the opacity of this texture on a mask layer. So I'm not actually erasing the texture layer. I am instead erasing on a mask. So I can change it whenever I want, or change it back if I want. Paint the mask in and out. Now I'm just playing with different modes for that texture, just to see what really strikes me, what looks good, what doesn't, do I like it there or not, So it's just a lot of back and forth. Now I'm going to just play with adjusting the colors of the texture. I just increased the saturation a little bit. And let's play with the hue a little bit. Kind of like pushing it into that blue area that we kind of were doing with the top of the creature. And then it kind of really sells the idea that he's coming out of this darkness, this bluish darkness. And I'm inverting the mask now. That's why that texture is changing from more background to foreground. Just to see what looks better, you know, it's all an experiment to see what looks better.